Hi, this is Luke Clancy, and welcome to the Cedar Log. On this week's episode of the Cedar Log, we have found audio of Dr. Goodman and Colonel Edson from the 1967 NOAC. In this audio, our founders make some remarks and answer questions from our men like you and myself. We would like to thank Dr. Sirkin for sharing this audio with us. If you have any questions about the History Committee, please feel free to reach out to our committee social media pages on Instagram and Facebook, or you can email us at history@unamilodge.org. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I'd like to welcome you all to our news conference today. We're supposed to have as our guest Dr. Goodman, and he is apparently lost somewhere right now. It's possible he went to the wrong auditorium or something, but I've got about 5 guys looking for him. So hopefully he'll be here before the end of the conference. We also have with us Colonel A. Edson, who is the co-founder of the Word of Yale with Dr. Goodman. So at this time I'd like to introduce you to Colonel Edson and let him make a few brief remarks, and then you may ask him whatever questions you would like. Colonel Edson?
Well, thank you. I don't know what remarks you'd like to have me make. It is always a very stimulating and challenging experience to come to one of these biennial conferences. When we founded the Order at Treasure Island in 1915, Mr. Goodman and I were thinking simply in terms of meeting a need at that camp at that time. And then, as I'll say tomorrow to the vigil members when I speak to them, other councils, we told executives of what our experience was, and they said, well, I'd like to do that myself, and so other chapters were gradually formed and developed into this marvelous organization now of more than 250,000 members. We certainly had no concept originally of anything of that sort, but we certainly did find that the order met a very great need in our local camp in that it laid emphasis on leadership in the living of the Scout Oath and Law and the service and aspect of it. And because it was so successful, other councils have done the same. Now, I don't know what questions you would like to ask. I'll be very glad to attempt to answer any that I can. Yes?
You stated that you're speaking to the vigils tomorrow. Can you tell us when and where?
It was supposed to have been a breakfast meeting at 7 o'clock, but we were informed this morning that there are 1,000 vigil members here, and the hall where it was to be held, if it was set up, that's in the ballroom in this building on the second floor, would only seat 500 for eating, so that only half of them could get in. Now, Erner, perhaps you know what the final plans have been in regard to the meeting tomorrow. The last I knew it was to be at 7:45 without the breakfast.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
That's right. There'll be an announcement tonight about that. Yeah. There will still be a meeting of vigil honor members, but unfortunately, no breakfast. It has to be taken first. It'll be at 7:45, as I understand it.
7:45 was the time that they discussed, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you want to address most of your questions to Mr. Goodman.
Would you like to say
Make a speech? No, I don't want to make a speech.
Okay. Are there any questions at all there?
I'll be glad to entertain any questions that pop to mind. Over there?
How many members did you first have when you started?
Carol checked me on this. My recollection is that when we met that fall, there were about 35. Now, is that your recollection?
There may have been that number who went through the initiation ceremonies in 1915. It was a smaller number than that came to
Camp
Morale, where we had the weekend.
But I think there were about 35 that went through the ordeal that first year, 1915. Next man. Yes, sir.
Was your deal then similar to what it is now?
Was what?
Was your deal the same then as it is now?
No.
Similar?
Well, yes, it was an overnight affair. I mean, they didn't have to stay up all night, but they camped out and they...
It was the end of the 1916 camp when those who had been members from the previous year and had been on the staff at Treasure Island the second year felt that something special ought to be done for Erner because of the marvelous inspirational leadership he'd given throughout the season. And so we concocted that vigil. He was absolutely dead tired from the work of running Treasure Island all summer, but we sent him up on the tea table above the island there, a little ways downstream, and he had to stay awake all night keeping his fire going in contemplation. I don't know what his contemplation was under the conditions, but
they were very real, I want to tell you, brother. And they told me afterward that they had killed one snake there. What kind was it? It wasn't a rattler, but the kind that were in the Delaware Valley, the poisonous snake. The snakes go by pairs, and they killed one of them during the process of getting the place ready for my vigil. However, that didn't worry me because I didn't know anything about it at the time. And the mate didn't turn up at all. But it was a wonderful experience. This was near what they called the Devil's Tea Table. Now, the Devil's Tea Table was a balanced rock up there on top of a high cliff looking down over the Delaware Valley. And I could see all of Treasure Island in the distance there. And as soon as the sun began to rise over the horizon, and it was a marvelous experience. So I was the first to keep the vigil, but it was all a mistake. It was not intended to be that way at all. The idea was that the top honor, which we now call the vigil, should be reserved for some hero, someone who had saved a life, someone who had done something worthy of a monumental tribute. And so my election or selection was all a mistake. I'm sorry to tell you. However, I had a great experience up near the Devil's Tea Table.
Mr. Goodman, how long have you been associated with Scouting?
56 years.
56 years?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about what significance the Order of the Arrow has to Scouting?
What significance the Order of the Arrow has to Scouting?
Yes, is this one of the highest attainable ordeals of Scouting, or
experiences of Scouting? We think, of course, it is. The one thing that we like to stress in membership in the Order is that it is by a democratic process. It is not those on the inside who select new members for the Order, but those who are their peers in their troop or their explorer post who make the selection. Of those who were trailblazers in cheerful service during their camping experience together, you see. That's it. Now, therefore, it's of a different order than the Eagle badge, which is obtained by anyone who has the guts and the brain power and the willingness to meet that. There's one over here first. Is he all through? Yes, sir.
What actually made you take up Scouting?
What made me take up Scouting? A group of boys made me take up Scouting. On the same week in April in 1911, two important things happened in my life. Number one, I had a date with a young lady who is still Mrs. Goodman. She was then about 15 and I was 20. And that was worth remembering. The other was that the same week, several boys came ringing my doorbell, asking me to go on a hike with them next Saturday because they'd lost their scoutmaster. And would I take over? And that got me in scouting.
How old were you when you founded the order?
How old what?
How old were you when you
How
founded?
old are you and how old were you when you founded?
How old am I now? That's a good question. I'm celebrating the spirit of 76. You know what? And when I founded the order, how old was I? You remember? Carol? It was in
That was
19...
52 years ago, so you can subtract 52.
52 from... I was 25. But wait a minute. 24. 24. Thank you. We're about the same age, aren't we, Carl?
Just about, that's right.
About the same age.
I was born in 91.
Yeah, but what date in 91?
December.
December. I was born in May 1921.
Yeah, you got me by about 7 months.
1891, I mean, yeah.
1891.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you first started the order, was the lodge organized the same as it is now?
Well, I wouldn't say the same as it is now, because many things have happened since those days, haven't they, Carol?
I'll say.
But we met for the fall meeting after the camp season and organized, somewhat after the pattern it is now, electing the first lodge chief and other officers and arranging for the administration of the lodge, somewhat after the fashion it is now, but not with the various committees that are now pretty generally used over the country.
Of course, in the summer of 15, the boys were being inducted into an organization that did not exist.
That's right.
The organization was created that fall after these boys had been inducted. I may say that the boys were called together essentially in order for us to learn from them whether they felt that the experience that they had had was significant in their lives and something that was worth repeating and continuing. And it was perhaps the deepest spiritual experience I ever had, certainly one of the deepest, the feeling of brotherly love amongst every one of the young men that came out to that meeting. So it was not for an instant in anybody's mind a question if, but only a question of how.
That's right. That's a very good statement, Carol.
And we spent the weekend discussing the how and then appointed committees. A committee on bylaws and the Constitution, a committee on ritual, and a committee on insignia. And those committees worked through the winter, and then we had a meeting in the spring and adopted the reports of these committees and actually constituted the organization just prior to the opening of Treasure Island in 16.
Young man down here.
How were these first members selected?
Same way they are now, by the vote of the fellow members of their troop in camp.
Sir, when and why was the first brotherhood given?
Beg pardon?
First brotherhood membership, why and when was it first given?
The brotherhood honor, as we now call it was then called the second degree. The brotherhood honor was not looked upon in those early days, check me if I'm wrong, Carol, in your memory, so much as it was a sealing of their membership started at camp in the ordeal ceremony. It was to further give them a dramatic understanding of the principles upon which the order was to stand, and the explanation of the brotherhood and the cheerfulness and the service and so on were in the brotherhood ceremony rather than in the ordeal ceremony. dramatically changed. I should explain, too, I think we owe it to this dear man to explain that the Brotherhood ceremony, as it now stands, is pretty much the result of a very wonderful scoutmaster, which we had in Philadelphia, Dr. Hinkle, who was a physician by trade, but a scoutmaster at heart, and who made up much of the Brotherhood ceremonies that now exist. Wouldn't you say that?
Yes, that's right. At that first floral meeting, for instance, only some of those who had been through the original initiation ceremony came out. In other words, there was an indication that not 100% of those who had been tapped would be sufficiently interested to want to continue.
They had taken the ordeal, though.
They'd taken the ordeal, but we wanted to have some means of knowing those that were interested in continuing and to try to seal their interest and their membership in continued activity. So that's why that did come along slightly afterwards.
May I ask how familiar you both are of the new policies you're presenting that will be mandatory the first of the year, and what your ideas on these changes are?
I don't know how you feel, Carl, but I feel that I haven't done much homework on that subject yet. You better pass over that question as far as I'm concerned. I haven't studied carefully.
Well, add to that, I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to comment on proposed changes.
No, they're proposed changes.
Do they submit any sort of resume to YouTube when they foresee major changes of this type?
I see them as a member of the National Committee, and that's all, particularly. I mean, I have no, this is not a one-man or a two-man organization.
I understand that. I thought it would just be a practice out of respect. They would submit a summary to you of some sort upon these adopted.
Well, I feel confident they will get our judgment.
Questions in the back.
Now, way back?
How did you get the ideas of starting the OA?
What gave us the idea of starting it? Wasn't that answered earlier in the meeting?
No, when I joined the Philadelphia staff in the spring of 15, Dr. Goodman was to be the director of Treasure Island camp. I was to be the co-director. There had been at Treasure Island for some years an award called Treasure Island Scout, or TIS for short. A boy could qualify for that by earning a certain number of points. He got a certain number of points for any badge, any test that he passed, or for identifying so many stars or so many trees, or for rendering a couple of hours of volunteer service. And when that added up to a certain number of points, he got his award and a little emblem that he was proud to wear on his shirt. Mr. Goodman explained this to me, and he said, I think that while that is fine so far as it goes, it lays its emphasis on the mechanics of the program. He said, I think we should have something that lays its emphasis on the living of the Scout Oath and Law. Well, it so happened that about that time, my father invited me to a meeting at which Ernest Thompson Seton was to speak. Seton was then known as the Chief Scout. He had for years had an organization patterned on Indian traditions that he called the Woodcraft Indians. And his talk was about the great values that he had found in his camp in using the symbolism of Indian ritual to bring out certain moral and character values. And I went back from that meeting and said to Mr. Goodman, I think that this is the answer of what we've been looking for. I think we can develop something patterned on the utilization of the symbolism of Indian ritual. to do the things that you have in mind. And that's how we get started.
And to add to the argument, we were camping. Treasure Island was actually an Indian camping ground. We would dig up arrowheads, as you remember, in those early days, and tomahawks and one thing or another. So it was quite logical to assume the Indian pattern for our ceremonies. Yes, sir.
Before we get to the rest of the episode, I would like to invite everyone to visit the Unami Lodge website, where you can see upcoming events and our Lodge trading post, to where you can buy new flaps, new apparel, and anything else you would like. Now, please sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
The National Board itself, the National Executive Board, yeah. That's right. On the recommendations of the Committee on Camping, National Committee on Camping. Beg pardon?
What year was it?
My recollection is, this is all in the audio handbook, if I'm not mistaken. My recollection is that it was about 1938 that it was officially adopted. Yes, sir.
What was the darkest days or period of time for the Order of the Arrow when you weren't?
The darkest time. You answer that question, brother. Did you ever go through any dark times?
Well, I would say critical times. I think the greatest crisis came to its climax at the 1924 Scout Executives Conference at Blue Ridge, North Carolina. There had been appointed, in preparation of this conference, a series of commissions on different subjects, including a commission on camping. And these commission reports were all printed and distributed before the conference started. So we were supposed to have done our homework and read these reports before the conference opened, so that when a particular topic was brought up for discussion, we could jump off from a knowledge of the thinking and findings of the commission. Well, the camping commission report was quite lengthy, and included in it, in one page, was a paragraph condemning the Order of the Arrow as being contrary to the spirit of scouting. Well, when it came time for the session, the chairman of the commission got up and he said, "Well, you've all read the report, so I don't think I need to waste time going over the bulk of that. There's just one part of it that I would like to emphasize." And then he launched into this violent attack on the order. And Erner and I looked at each other, and when we got through, one or the other would get up and say, "Well, have you been a member of the order yourself?" "No." "Have you ever used the order in your camp?" "No." "Have you ever visited any camp where it was in operation to see how it was operating?" "No." "Well then, how can you be so sure of yourself in regard to its qualities when you admit you've never had any experience with it and don't know what you're talking about?" And the original motion, which he had proposed as chairman, was that the executives go on record as totally opposed to any such program as the Order of the Arrow, and demand that it be abolished. Well, Erner and I spelled each other, and a few other members who were present chimed in, and somebody would get up and move an amendment to soften the tone a little bit, and soften the tone a little bit. And they kept softening the tone until finally they got it down to the point where the motion was that the organization went on record as being opposed to such organizations as were contrary to the spirit of scouting. but making no reference to the order whatsoever.
Thank you to everyone tuning into this episode of the Cedar Log. There will be the rest of the audio in next week's episode. If you have any questions beforehand, please feel free to reach out to the History Committee on our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, or you could email us at history@unamilogic.org. Thank you, stay safe, and have a great day.